Hey guys. So this morning I woke up and I was scrolling through Facebook like I think most people do in the morning, unless you're a better functioning human being than I am, because I have a hard time for some reason not looking at my damn phone when I wake up. But anyway, I woke up, I was scrolling through, and I came across this article. Uh, the page that posted it, it was a local business, and I went ahead and clicked on the article because the headline says one of LAPD's preferred weapons to help officers avoid shootings often doesn't work. I thought this was an interesting thing. I think it had a picture of the taser on the thumbnail as well. So I clicked on it and I read it. One of the first things that I noticed about the article is that it was from 2016. I'm always leery when I see somebody post an article that, I don't know, this thing's over 5 years old now. There's just a certain amount of relevancy that I think should exist when you're posting articles online. I thought I would go ahead and talk about it today, though, because it's actually articles like this that are old, outdated, and actually have some misinformation in it that get shared all over the place over and over and over again, leading people to believe that this is a new thing. I noticed this phenomenon the other day. I often will peruse online at a lot of these kind of anti-police, either Facebook groups or Reddit groups, what have you. And one thing that I've noticed is that they will take an incident from 4, 5, 8, sometimes even 10 years ago. They'll come across an article about that incident and they'll share it as if it happened again yesterday. What this does is it means that you can go almost every single day and post an article about the police doing something really bad and make it sound like every single day the police are doing something really horrible, when really what you're doing is you're cherry picking incidents that have happened over the last 10 years and you're just repeating those over and over and over again. So regardless of that, I thought this would be something interesting worth talking about. So I'll go ahead and just talk about a little bit about what the article kind of does right. Here at the top, you have a little picture of a taser. Tells you a little bit about what they do. One thing I would like to point out is the wires here. The way it actually works is this top wire actually fires straight. This bottom wire fires down at an angle, which this diagram down here kind of accurately shows. Not so much in the picture here. What that creates is an environment where the closer you are to the person, the closer the darts are going to be when they fire out. The further away you are from the person, the further away the darts are going to be. What that means is these two darts they're conducting a current. So if you're conducting a current on somebody and you got both the darts kind of right here, this is where all the current's going to be. It's going to be between these two darts. But if you get one dart up here and one dart way down here in the lower hemisphere or right around the belt line, that's a lot of ground for that current to travel through, and you're going to have a much more effective use of the taser. So they went ahead and pulled some examples, and this is an example of where the taser was used and it was ineffective and it led to an officer-involved shooting. So as 2 Los Angeles police officers wrestled with a vandalism suspect, one grabbed her taser and pressed the stun gun against the 38-year-old man's body. The taser was supposed to deliver a jolt strong enough to stun the man so the officers could take him into custody, but the taser had no effect. Instead, LAPD said the man snatched the stun gun from the officer and shocked her in the leg, leaving her unable to move. Her partner opened fire and fatally shot the man. So the thing that they're talking about in this is actually going to be a close quarters deployment. When you use the taser at close quarters, like I said, you've got electric current traveling through a spot about this big on somebody's body. What that does is it does create a little bit of pain, but it does not cause the human body to lock up. You don't get that neuromuscular incapacitation that you're looking for with a taser. What you have to do, if you fire at someone at close quarters, say you put both darts right here in like their shoulder, you have to take your taser where the probes are still connected to that person, follow up down on the person's leg or on their butt, something like that, so that you have a circuit that covers their whole body. That's when you get lockup, and that's when you're able to subdue a person using a taser. There's a very good chance in this case what they did was they just used the taser in drive stun mode, which when you do that, you've got this cartridge right here on the taser. You can actually take that cartridge off really easily. You do that a lot of times so that you can reload the cartridge. So what you'll see in a lot of taser videos involving the police, where it was a bad taser deployment, is they're wrestling with somebody on the ground. They take that taser cartridge off and they start pressing the taser against someone's body. So when they're doing that, there's actually an electrode on the top. Can't remember if it's on the top and the bottom or from side to side of the actual taser gun itself that connects to the cartridge and helps the cartridge fire. When you're doing that, there's actually two, it's almost like prongs on a battery, like a 9-volt battery. What you're doing is you're pressing that up against someone's body and you rock that thing back and forth, and it creates a lot of pain, but all that is creating pain in the general area where you're pressing the taser. If the person moves suddenly, you're going to lose contact with their body, and it's very easy for someone to move their hands, reach up and grab the taser. So what happened in this case was you had two officers wrestling with a suspect. I don't know anything else about this suspect, whether or not they were armed, but they were in very close proximity to this person. They tried either a close quarters deployment or a drive stun deployment that was ineffective. The one officer was stripped of the taser by the suspect. The other officer, realizing that the suspect, either he was armed prior to this or now he's definitely armed, had to use lethal force. So one thing that is a little bit misleading about this article is it says that the preferred weapons to help officers avoid shootings often doesn't work. It's not saying that if the taser had been used properly, it didn't work. They're just saying it didn't work. To me, this is a training issue. It's also an experience issue. And then it brings up several other cases where the taser didn't work, and then it's going to bring up some statistics. Like I said, this article was from 2016, so they're using 2015 as the most recent year. And what it shows is that for some reason with LAPD, the effectiveness of their taser usage seemed to go down over the years. Well, I recently did a video on my other channel with use of force statistics from the Columbus Division of Police. I was able to pull up their annual report. So what this shows is how often a taser was used. Let's see. Doesn't really say how many times per year. I think that was on a different page. But what I want to show is how the effectiveness has changed over the years. So in 2015, the effectiveness of the taser was 68, then it goes up to 75, what have you. Well, here is with close quarters mode. So by 2019, officers of the Columbus Division of Police, with their close quarters probe deployments, found it to be 100% effective. So I just think that goes to show you kind of some of the training, as well as how over the years this percentage has gone up. That shows that it's a little bit of training and repetition of training. So these officers weren't just trained on this technique once. They're actually trained on this technique every single year, and that's why they've gotten better at it. And I can attest to that when you go in for your taser certification, you actually fire, I don't remember how many times you fire the taser, but you fire it at least once standing up. Then there's another time where they have a dummy on the ground. You actually go in close quarters deployment, shoot the darts right in the back of this dummy that's on the ground, and then you take your taser and you follow up on like a calf or, bud or something like that. And you actually get some effective training on how to use these tools, and it's showing up in the numbers. I'll also tell you that some of these statistics are a little bit skewed because officers around the country, I don't know if they've become taser dependent, but I can tell you that taser dependency is a huge problem. The reason for that is because officers are using tasers when it's just not the most appropriate time. They're not setting themselves up for a successful taser deployment. And I can tell you, in 10 years as a police officer, I've only used a taser twice. Well, I've only tased 2 individuals. The very first time that I used my taser was probably back in 2012. And this was during the bath salts days when we were seeing people high on bath salts all the time. This particular night, a gentleman walked over to his neighbor's house, knocked on the door, was wearing all of his clothes. The neighbor came to the door and said, "Hey, I don't remember the guy's name, Jeff, how you doing?" Jeff walks into the house, walked around the house until he found his neighbor's wife. His wife, I think, was downstairs doing laundry. Jeff decided to take that opportunity, take off all of his clothes. So he's standing there completely naked, and he started saying, "I'm not thirsty." They were trying to talk to him. He just kept saying, "I'm not thirsty. I'm not thirsty. I'm not thirsty." This, as you can imagine, didn't go over well with the husband or the man who lived in that house. So they had a slight physical altercation, and then we'll call him Jeff, ran from the house naked. And that's when the call to the police was made. So myself and a bunch of other officers were driving around the area trying to find this naked guy who was high on bath salts. We eventually found him. Actually, one of my other officers found him. It was a female officer. She stated that she had him in a certain area, and I was very close, so I responded. We both got out of our cars, started following him on foot, ordering him to stop, and he refused to stop. The first officer tried to deploy a taser on him, and it was ineffective. I think she was just at a bad angle. I don't know if both probes hit, both probes didn't hit. She might have been too far away. One of them actually might have gone into his back, and the other one might have gone between his legs and not making contact. So I moved up a little bit closer to him, and I deployed my taser. He dropped instantly to the ground. I had a very good probe spread. I think one was in his butt cheek, one was right between his shoulder blades. And as soon as the 5 seconds was over, because when you activate the taser, you get a 5-second ride. So taser's going for 5 seconds. As soon as it was done, he puts his hands on the ground, stands back up, and says, "I'm not thirsty." So once the probes are already in somebody, all you have to do is tap that switch, and then they get another 5-second ride. He took multiple 5-second rides, and each time he was completely incapacitated, flat on his back, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything, naked as the day he was born, which was not my favorite thing to see when you got a guy that's naked on his back being electrocuted. Eventually, once the taser stopped cycling, he looked at me, put his hands on the ground, and said, "I'm not thirsty." I told him, I'm like, "Dude, stop getting up. You got to stay on the ground." And finally, he understood somehow through his state of mind. He understood that it's a good idea for him to stay on the ground. He stayed on the ground. It took another, a minute and a half maybe for other officers to arrive. Once we had probably 4 or 5 guys there, we were able to hold him down, put him in handcuffs, get an ambulance, and we got him out of there. The second time that I had to use a taser, one of my buddies and I were arresting a guy who was, we were arresting him for domestic violence. It was a very fresh scene. We were in the house with him and his wife, had talked to them both. And I remember one of the details of the attack was that he pulled her hair so bad that there was a clump of hair with skin on it in the kitchen sink. And that was what we decided, hey, we now have probable cause. We're going to tell this guy he's under arrest. Walked up to him, one officer in front of him, one officer behind him. said, "Hey, buddy, you're under arrest. You need to put your hands behind your back." When we went to grab his hands, he pulled his hands away, which is a very common thing. He wasn't necessarily fighting us, trying to hurt us, but he was just trying to get away, didn't want to be arrested. We were in a very small kitchen, just one of those, almost like an apartment kitchen. It's like the size of like your desk. And we had him on the ground, but me and the other officer, we were so crammed in there on top of him, we couldn't get his hands out from under him. And there was no way to get an angle on him so that you could, reach in from the side, get under him, do anything like that. So we had some options. We could have started punching him, kneeing him, spraying mace on his face. Those would have all been approved techniques in that environment. Or we could have continued to jerk on his arms and his shoulders, possibly dislocating his shoulder. In order to avoid doing all those things, I chose to do a close quarters deployment. So I put the taser up to his back. I yelled at him, "Hey, you're going to get tased." He didn't respond. So I popped the taser, 2 probes in his back. He let out a little yelp because it hurts. Those probes. See if it's on the top of this. Yeah, these probes are darts with kind of like fish hooks on the end of them. So it goes into your skin, I don't know, an inch or so. I mean, it hurts pretty good, and it smacks you because it fires. Like a lot of people who have been tased thought initially that they got shot until they realized that it didn't actually hurt that bad. But it does. It's a nice loud pop. Sounds like a gun going off. He yelped, and then he realized, "Oh, I'm okay." So he kept fighting. Well, the taser was still cycling. So I took that taser and I followed up down on the back of his hamstring and I pressed it into his jeans real hard. And that's the point that he just started screaming like he was being murdered. And as soon as the taser cycled, he put his arms out right away, and we were able to take him into custody. It was funny because I remember every time an officer has a use of force on a suspect and there's a possible injury involved, a supervisor has to come and interview them. So my sergeant at the time, can't quite remember who he was that particular night, but I remember I always stand behind the sergeant as he's doing the interview, or at least stand nearby so I can hear what the guy has to say. It was funny because the guy was like, "Yeah, the first time they tased me, it didn't really hurt that bad. I was fine." But he's like, "The second time, that's when it really hurt." Well, the funny thing is I only tased him once, but what he felt was the initial pop, and then he felt the follow-up, and that's what caused the lockup. So that was kind of my thoughts, the thoughts that came to mind when I saw this article. I wanted to share it with you guys today because a lot of times we'll see stuff like this. It's a little bit outdated, or it'll be written by someone who doesn't quite understand how tasers work and how taser training works. So I wanted to give you my perspective. Those are my thoughts for today. I'll talk to you soon.